as Fitz. Fitz, how are you tonight?
I'm okay, Ray, and we decided just to come on the two of us tonight because of very unfortunate incident that occurred in San Diego yesterday. We're going to talk about that, and then we're going to end our little session tonight doing an update the best we can on the whole Nancy Guthrie matter. And there's been some developments, more of an administrative level, so we can get into that down the line in the next 20 minutes to a half hour.
Yeah, uh, it's really a shame to even talk about that issue with the out in San Diego at the mosque shooting. What my understanding is that there was two teenage suspects that allegedly opened fire outside of the mosque at a center in San Diego. It killed three men. One was a maintenance man, and the other were two adults. And then the two teenagers wound up killing themselves. The incident occurred the day before the Muslim holiday of Eid al-Adha, which is really has the Muslim community in an uproar there. Uh, I'm not too sure about all the timeline, but I'm really concerned, Jim, um, about how this thing played out. The first thing is that the mother, at approximately 9:42 in the morning, reached out to the police and said that her son was missing. She thought he was suicidal. He took several of her firearms and he stole her vehicle. And he was dressed in camouflage clothing. Now, I remember listening to the press briefing, and the sheriff said that they were able to locate them some distance through license plate readers, LPR readers. But this mother did exactly what the police tell all parents to do. And that is, if you feel you see something, say something. That's exactly what she did. So the question is, do you think there was enough time? My question to you, do you think there was enough time at 9:42 and only a few hours later, maybe an hour and a half later, is when the shooting takes place? Uh, do you think there was enough time for the police to stop that incident?
Well, this is a whole can of worms we can discuss with this. You're right. The mother did the right thing that morning, putting a timestamp on just yesterday morning at circa 9:40 or so. Um, and I understand she became even more concerned that he wasn't just suicidal, but because he hooked up with a buddy of his.
Hmm.
And we're not going to use the names. We never use names on Cold Red of these types of people. Uh, but because he hooked up with a buddy of his, uh, that she thought it may be something besides air quotes just suicide they were planning, especially with the camo gear and of course the missing guns. So yes, she did the right thing in calling the police. What I have to now ask is how much did she know before yesterday morning, the day before, the weeks before, the months before. This kid's, this young man's, this person's downward spiral, of course, as you and I well know, Ray, and our audience knows, it didn't start yesterday morning. These guys have been living this life. They have been exploring and reconnoitering. They most likely did a dry run of this mosque, the school in the days prior. They're going to have all kinds of internet searches about the mosque, time frame, like you said, the Muslim holiday, which was pending. And we know for a fact they were deeply uh, steeped in this neo-Nazi white supremacist belief system. And folks, early on here, I'm going to say check out an episode of Cold Red that Ray and I did with Keith. That's not his real name, but he was a white supremacist we interviewed here that I knew in the past, and I've stayed in touch with him. He's a perfectly fine family man, business owner now, but in his early teens, about the same age as these guys, he uh, he got caught up in all this kind of stuff. He was radicalized. It wasn't much. It wasn't as much the internet back in the early '90s, although it progressed there. But he certainly ran with a bad crowd. and he got radicalized. And he was pulling bank robberies. Ray, I know you remember the episode with Keith. So I have a feeling these guys' trajectory was not that much different. Whether they went to some of these camps, these Bible studies they used to call them that Keith went to, probably now it was mostly online. But my point is to this, referencing Keith, just like my buddy, his uncle back in the day, the mother, and if there is a father involved, I'm not sure, but family members would have had to see something, both families of the both shooters from yesterday, so both killers from yesterday. So this didn't just happen overnight. These two people were spiraling downwards, and maybe we'll find out police were called in the last few weeks, few months, a year ago. We don't know, but yesterday was a tragic step, was a tragic incident that it didn't just start when they woke up that morning. This was well planned, well thought out, and unfortunately now 3 are dead. You can say unfortunately they're dead, but better them than anyone else after the 3 they killed. And I'm not sure if maintenance person, security person, but somebody confronted these guys
Mhm.
and stopped the shoot. I'm not sure if he was armed or not, but somebody stepped up to minimize the shootings and the killings, and kudos to that person. And of course, our prayers and everything go out to those who were killed. But we can get a little bit more in the manifesto. Ray, you want to pick up on anything I just
I,
said or following
I
up?
do, Jim. You talk about they didn't wake up uh, yesterday morning and decide, hey, let's go shoot up this mosque. We've talked about this several times, and our audience knows that there's a pathway to violence. It usually starts out with a grievance, some hate ideology, and Jim talked about the radicalization of these two individuals. I mean, one suspect was 17 years old, the other was 18 years old. So, for all intents and purposes, they were teenagers. One was at a local high school. He was set to graduate within the next month. But the thing is, they found a lot of things, and I think what they're going to find as we move forward here, when they go in to some of the things, posters in his room, they go on social media, they're going to find a lot of hate. And I'd like to know where this comes from, because it was directed at the Muslim community, but yet when they fled the scene after they did some shooting in the front of this building, they opened fire on a landscaper. Now, I'm not saying all landscapers are they're not as maybe or he was Islamic, but I'll bet my bottom dollar, not knowing anything about it, that he didn't look like them. I'll bet you he was somebody that was different than them, and that's that ideology that they have. And I really have a concern. Was the mother contacting the police because she was worried about her son, or worried what would happen if her son did something? And I'm not saying that the mother had looking at herself, but geez, if you see these things and your son needs help, you need to get that. And you sit here, could this realistically have been prevented? Well, the police would have needed to know a lot sooner. My son's suicidal and he left with some weapons and he's dressed in camouflage. She never said, I think he's going to go shoot up a building. She may have known that, may not. When you look at some of these things, and you look at, and I know that the chief of police said they're going to take a look at this as a hate crime until they can prove it, unless they can prove it otherwise. And I really believe that it's when this comes all down, it's going to be a hate crime. But I think the online radicalization among teenagers is a real problem in this country. And you're starting to see a rise in attacks that's targeting religious institutions, not just in Islam, but Jewish, black churches, all these different things. There was just a huge
Catholic churches,
Catholic churches. There was
Catholic
just a
schools.
huge fire, and they don't know what happened. A huge fire in the state of Delaware of one of the oldest churches in the state. It was an African American church. It just amazes me what happened to that, and I'm waiting to hear the outcome of that. But my problem is we need to address these extremists and the extremist content that's starting to influence our younger offenders. These social media ecosystems are really contributing to a lot of this violence, and I think that's a real problem.
Yeah, they clearly went down into the rabbit holes of the deep dark web, and where all the rabbit shit, and I'm going to be a little profane here,
Yeah.
where it lays, and that's what they started subscribing to. Let me add here from a behavioral perspective, and we can bounce back and forth on a few things. When this all comes about, and when their psychological autopsies are undertaking,
Mm-hmm.
which means besides their physical autopsies of their bodies, they're going to look at everything they've done. We've talked about this before on Cold Red,
Mm-hmm.
but go into all their readings, all their downloadings, all their searchings, all their writings, of course. You're going to find a few things inconsistent. I should say consistent with each of them, and that is they hate themselves. They may not admit it, but they do, and that's also known as self-loathing. They'll talk like bad guys, or they did before they died. They'll do these types of actions, which are cowardly. You walk into a house of worship and you start shooting innocent people. It's as cowardly as you get. Um, but I bet you're going to find them. They're also incels. I've been saying that more and more about some of these guys. Uh, I only saw the picture of one of them. I didn't see the other. Looks don't even really matter. I mean, it's beauty is the eyes of the beholder. But I guarantee you, these guys weren't popular with the girls. I'm not sure if they're straight, gay. They mentioned some of that in their manifesto that they don't like. They almost didn't like anybody that wasn't exactly like them. They readily acknowledge they're straight white males, and if you're Jewish, gay, they even say they don't hate Muslims, but they don't like the Islamic religion. Okay, so and that's why they had to do what they did. But you're going to find all kind of shortcomings here. I use that word in the one guy. I think he's the older one. In one of his parts of his manifesto, he wrote the words. I guess he wasn't a tall guy, and he wrote, "quote being short now more than ever." And he goes on explaining why he has these problems and why he's angry at people. Tall, short, whatever. You don't go and kill people, but that and not everyone who's of shorter stature, of course, is insecure or has a violent streak, suicidal or homicidal ideation. But this guy would have come out had all kinds of insecurities, and he backed himself up with guns. I'm sure they were at a range at some point in the last few weeks, a firearms range, and we have these personality issues. They're clearly there were some symbols found. The SS was on one of the fuel cans. I guess they were going to do everything they could, burn things down, shoot plate people up. Um, so the SS symbol, the two S's, it's from the Nazi secret police. They had something. The New Crusade was one of their logos. Sons of Tarrant. I'll use that name since it was mentioned there. But he was the shooter in New Zealand in 2019 who killed 51 people. And he now, of course, he's dead. I believe, he killed himself or police killed him. I forget. But he's now worshipped among these types of people. So, you know, these are not two brave young men fighting the good fight, no matter how they see it. They're cowards, and they're following cowards. No doubt they followed still won't use their names, the Columbine high school shootings from
Mm-hmm.
2019, I'm sorry, 1999, who chose April 19th to be their day when they shot up the school, which happened to be Hitler's birthday. The following year, or several years later, was Oklahoma City, of course, on
Mm-hmm.
April 19th. And I'm sorry, that was in 1995 was Oklahoma City. So it on April 19th. So the bottom line is these people, nothing is original to these people. They borrow from others, and they build up their weak-willed, insecure personalities. They can't get the girls they want, but probably because they're just so odd, and they turn people off, and they adopt adopt this neo-Nazi mentality and feel that somehow gives them the right to harm other people or take it upon themselves. But yeah, which this path of violence, which of course manifested itself yesterday morning. So there's a lot here psychologically. We'll learn more about them, but and I'll end with this and let you get some words in, Ray. But you still have to look at the parents of these people. Yes, the mother did the right thing at 9:42 yesterday morning. But what was their upbringing like before that? What kind of drugs were they on? Were they potheads? Were they on Ritalin since they were little kids? Were they ever told no in their lives? And you know what? If I'm a Second Amendment guy, Ray, I support it. I know
Mhm.
you do, but you got to lock your guns up, and you can't have people having ready access to them, especially young kids. Wearing with camouflage clothes and and spouting this sort of insidious language. So you know, and whether there's any laws that were broken by the parents, if not criminally, civilly, maybe that's where we need to go in this country is start suing the parents of these kids who are doing these things and bankrupt them. If it can be proven in court that they could have done something, or at least tried more than like with an hour to go, call the police then. Give it to you, Ray.
Yeah, it was actually 2 hours, but it doesn't matter. I mean, Jim, we talked about that pathway, the fact that there was a grievance of some sort. Then they had an ideation. There's not a doubt in my mind. I know you agree with this, that this mosque, with the largest in San Diego County, was targeted by these two individuals. There was probably surveillance, as you mentioned, prior to. Uh, and there was some things in the planning and the research before they got to the breach into the attack of this thing. But I'm sure they went out and practiced with these weapons somewhere, whether it was at a range. You're going to see all these things come about. You're going to see all this hate message and all these different things. And one man, and you mentioned him earlier, he was a security guard at the mosque. And I'm going to mention his name. His name was Amin Abdullah. And it's said that he warned the teachers to lock the classroom doors and he helped protect the children inside the school that was attacked at the mosque. And during that attack, he was killed when he went and he confronted these individuals. And I think what happened is two other adults, I don't know all the facts of this, also lost their life when they kind of supported him. And that caused these individuals to flee. And they went a couple blocks from the incident right there, and they wound up taking their lives. You know, we talk about victims, and those three individuals are victims. But I'm going to tell you what they did, and you can't overlook this heroism, especially by the security guard. You can't overlook it. What he did saved countless lives yesterday. It really, really did. And I'm going to tell you, it's important that you prepare and that your situational awareness, that you know everything that's going on around you. And the security preparedness for houses of worship is paramount. They should be going through active shooter training. They should all be doing that. You want your religious institutions to be open, but in today's environment, you can't lose sight of the security that's needed in these religious communities. And it's across all bases. It's not one religious community that's being targeted. They're all being targeted by these different groups through these ideologies. You know, this there's a lot of increased safety concerns for all these individuals, but I gotta wonder, is this really a suicidal mission? It apparently was, because most of these situations, when they actually permeate themselves, very rarely does the individual engage, the offender engage in this, survive it? You see once in a while that someone does, but in most cases, the individual usually takes their own life, whether it's self inflicted or whether they're shot and killed by the police. But I'll tell you what, when we look back on these two individuals, we're going to see that they've been suffering from mental health issues for a long time.
Of course, yes.
And you know that when we do that autopsy of these individuals, behavioral autopsies of these individuals. But I'm going to tell you, that security guard and those other two individuals, they're heroes,
Yeah.
and they gave their life so all those kids could survive. And God bless them for that. I really, really mean that. Jim, this is a rapidly developing story, and there's a lot of information. The investigation is still active. There's a lot of additional details, especially on the subjects, their backgrounds, and what their motives might have been. Although they never explain what their motives, I think you and I can pretty much, we do the psychological autopsy, pretty much say, hey, they hated these people, but it's going to come out in the coming days.
But
It'll
first
come
they
out.
hated themselves, and then they
That's
had to
correct.
find someone
Mhm.
to take that self-hatred out on to make themselves somehow feel better about who and what they are. So, yeah, we're barely 36 hours into this
Right.
tragic event, and unfortunately, the next nut job is out there. And yeah, that's what you are. If you happen to be listening to us, I hope you're not one of our fans, but you're a nut job. And if you're considering something like this, you know, your meds aren't strong enough, or you got to get back on them, or your parents, never said no to you, and that's where the issues come in. So yeah, we can come back to this topic. Of course, there's a manifesto. I read some of it. Not all of it's been released, at least as far as I know. But these two young men, being polite here, we're all over the place. And last thing, Ray, my understanding is one of the individuals shot the other twice in the head,
Mm.
then took his own life. So we have to get that confirmed. Of course, the actual autopsy crime scene analysis will tell us what happened, but it could have been a murder suicide. Who knows if even the other person who was first shot by his buddy wanted to get shot. And ironically, they were in a BMW, a German-made car. Not that Germans are Nazis, but of course, 80 years ago, that's where the movement started. So I guess there was some consistency there in that regard. But yeah, sad story. And you're right, the men are heroes who gave their lives, and let's just hope lessons are learned that nothing is worth giving your life away at such an early age, or being in prison for the rest of your life for a temporary. Listen again. I'll leave it with this. Listen to that episode with Keith. You'll realize how he finally realized he was on a loser way of life, and he would call himself a loser for like those 5 6 years back then, and now he's the antithesis of that. He's a well, producing, member of society with a great family, but these two guys didn't have a chance to turn around, and they paid the ultimate price by their own hands, but not before forcing other people to give their lives for their stupid, meaningless, uh, psychologically disoriented cause. So more to come, and I'm sure in a future episode of Cold Red we can recap what we learned from
The
there.
one thing about Keith is when he was engaged in his behavior, it was in the early '90s, late '80s, early '90s, and I was part of the arrest team.
That's right.
When I didn't know that till we spoke to him that night, I'm thinking, I remember that. I remember that time when we went out and did the arrest there, because the arrest came off the bank robbery squad, and you talked to one individual, and I never put two and two together because we never talked about it. But I don't think he was suffering from a mental illness.
No.
I think these individuals
Yes.
were.
Yeah, he never went out. They never went out to kill anybody. Keith. They were
Right.
not. You just listen to the episode. They wanted to rob banks to forward. I mean, they had these long-ranging goals. I mean, he was 15, 16, 17, robbing
Yeah.
banks to get money for their cause. Yeah, there was a white supremacy thing, back then, but he wasn't shooting up innocents in that regard. And They would have shot it out with the cops, he said, if they pulled them over on that fateful day. If you listen to that story, when they left a bank robbery and there was a police officer following them for a while, and some midwestern blizzard came along and may have changed everyone's life, including the police officer who was following them, who never did stop them. So yeah, check out that episode. You'll learn a lot more about what guys like these two shooters from yesterday, what they were exposed to. These guys were from yesterday, the hardcore of the hardcore, and um, yeah, they're paying the price right now, and looking up at the rest of us with their other uh, evil people. Do you want to switch topics a little bit? Is
Yeah,
another not
let's.
friendly topic or
No, this
positive
is not.
topic?
This is not friendly at all. I'm kind of. The more and more I hear about this topic with Nancy Guthrie, the angrier I become, um, and I think it's very selfish of the leadership at the Pima County Sheriff's Department. I really do. Um, you know, Nancy Guthrie. The only reason why this garnered national attention is because it was Savannah's mother. Otherwise, it would have been just somebody that was taken. But because it was Savannah's mother, uh, it had a lot. And you have to understand the emotional impact of these missing person cases on a community, on a family, is immense. It really, really is immense. But I get it. I also get it that when you're running one of these investigations, the challenge is how can I be transparent to the public while still protecting the investigation that's ongoing? And that's really a tough juggling act. I get that. But from my estimation, and Jim, I know you agree with this, when we were running cases like this, the investigation always came first. As much as we wanted to be transparent, sometimes you just couldn't because any information that came out could be detrimental to the investigation. And that didn't happen here. That didn't happen here at all. I mean, I can't believe it took 4 days for the Bureau to get involved. I can't believe it. I mean, I know that in any case where kidnapping is suspect, that we're involved immediately because of the interstate nexus. I can't believe why did it take 4 days? Why were and we had to go back in and research everything that was done. It you know how hard that is. I mean, I've been on that end where we come in and I say, why are we doing this? Why are we wasting our time? I mean, we can't even get our laboratory to look at evidence that's been looked at by another laboratory. Why are we going in and looking at something that the police have done when they should have invited us in right from the beginning? And why didn't they invite us in, Jim? Why didn't they invite us in?
Well, first of all, it's not us anymore, Ray. We're both
I know,
retired.
but I
But
mean, you never. I know.
our former agency, the FBI, I knew what you meant. It would be nice if they invited us, cold red in.
I
I'm not
agree.
saying we'd have it solved, but I think we could have certainly helped with some of those early profiles we put out, even talking to the abductor, possibly abductors plural, but I'm pretty sure it's one person. At least the alpha male is the one in charge. But um, yeah, you and I, we did media interviews together. We certainly did Cold Red together. We did some separate, and I was hesitant to criticize, which I usually am, because I've been in the works. I'm watching a Teddy Roosevelt special right now. I think it's on Netflix, and he has a famous quote. I don't know exactly the words, but basically, anyone can be a critic. It's the man in the arena who's doing the job that has to be allowed to do his job. Okay, I agree with that. We've all been doing public things and been criticized, maybe private things too, uh, and I was hesitant to do that of the sheriff, but it does seem like there was a lack of cooperation early on, including with the lab. He had his own special lab in Florida he wanted to use, which, if nothing else, the local taxpayers would have to foot the bill for that in Pima County, um, uh, where the FBI, I mean, taxpayers taxpayers would eventually be paying for it, of course, but it'll be spread out across the whole country. But because those DNA tests are not cheap. as you know, for these
Hmm.
private sector companies. And the FBI has its own lab, so it's already funded in that regard. So that's just one part of it. Um, so yeah, I'm willing to give the rank and file a pass here because I haven't heard anything negative come out about them. But there certainly seems to be in recent weeks information came out about the sheriff himself, including some type of an investigation or an argument or something from 10 years before with the FBI. He wasn't arrested or anything like that, but some disagreement. And is he holding some kind of a grudge? Didn't want to let him in. We both know how bosses are in local FBI offices, Ray. Whatever boss he had a problem with 10 or so years ago, that
He's
special
gone.
agent in charge, SAC, is long gone. And the first thing SACs do when they come into a new office, as you well know, is they obviously introduce themselves to the FBI agents and support team working with them within the division. But they go out to the various resident agencies, visit those folks, and of course talk to the local police officers, chiefs of police, commissioners, superintendents, and that includes, of course, elected sheriffs like we have in Pima County. So I would have been very surprised if there wasn't some kind of interaction already between the sheriff and the FBI office there out of, I guess it would have been out of Phoenix
Right.
division with the
Phoenix
Tucson
Division.
RA, something like that, the satellite office. So I'm not going to go overboard here, but boy, I think we're back on 105 or 10 days now
Right.
since she's been gone. It does not look good, and it will be awful if when the report card or whatever is put out on this case, if somehow there were missteps on the part of anyone, and I'll call out the FBI if they made missteps here. I know you would too, Ray.
Hmm.
But if it is the part of the sheriff's department not sharing information or not bringing the FBI and other agencies in sooner, because those first 48 hours, as we know, are the
Hmm.
most critical. But you don't slack off after that either. The next week or two are almost as important. And now again, we're well over 3 months, and they seem to be no closer than they were before. So I I hope I'm wrong on this, and all of a sudden something comes together. There's someone in handcuffs, and prayers are still being said. Maybe Mrs. Guthrie is still among us, but I think the family has already realized that is a long shot. So and Ray, we put out the profile on a few different shows, including
Yep.
our own, of who we think this person is. This is somehow tied into Savannah's life, not suggesting she or even her immediate family had anything to do with the abduction, but there's someone that was in her life sending her emails, a fan, a fanatic, it's where the word fan comes from, a stalker that somehow didn't get what he wanted from Savannah. So he got what he wanted by taking her mother. And I believe if this case is ever solved, it'll fall somewhere under an umbrella, something like that.
Jim, you're right. I remember working cases like this, and there's always somebody in the other agency, local law enforcement, state law enforcement, that I've worked with before that they don't like me or I don't like them because of something that occurred, but never, ever did that ever interfere in the investigation itself. And you are so right that first 48 hours is crucial. And for the bureau, that's what upsets me. For the bureau to have to come in, and people raise that question. I got asked that question in some of the media hits that we did. Well, why is the FBI going back in and doing a search again? Why are they going all over this place? The things that were failed to be done, the things that were missed. You got to understand, Pima County Sheriff's Department, they're very, very capable law enforcement department. I have no doubt about that. But there's some things that are beyond the scope of what you're used to doing. And that's when you ask for help. And that's all. I'm not saying that you can't do that, but if you have the help, it makes you even that much better at what you're doing. And the things that they missed, allegations of evidence that was not immediately sent to the FBI lab. And you know as well as I do that the decision of the laboratory to choose is huge in these major investigations. And everything should be in one laboratory so that it synchronizes with everything else that's brought in, not in separate laboratories. That's a big faux pas there. Chain of custody, there were concerns there. Uh, you know, just because these disagreements occur, you got to make sure that they don't affect public trust. There's a lot of public criticism that's been directed at the sheriff, at Sheriff Nanos. I don't know if this is true. I'm going to throw it out, but there's a lot of complaints that have come from people in his department about him, and some of the claims by some of these people inside the department that have been reported by journalists, not by me, but by journalists that have written, say that he's hindered or slows parts of the investigation. He was concerned about being overwhelmed, his department being overwhelmed with too many leads to cover. I've never heard anything like that in my life before. Uh, it, you
That's
know,
why you bring the FBI in. They have
correct,
entire software programs set up to
correct.
categorize. I forget. It probably has a new name by now, but there was a name for it when we were in there. And they come right in. They hook up the laptops, and the leads are categorized. They can spit out to different agents, different officers, sheriffs, deputies, whatever. But that didn't happen here,
Well,
seemingly.
all those media appearances by Nanos, two, three times a day for the first 10 days, uh, there's a danger in that. And the danger is it creates speculation versus verified facts. And a lot of that happened. And the theories, and I said this on one of the medias when you or I were there. We both said it, that the media is sensationalizing this, and they're running with it. They're fueling it. They keep throwing logs on the fire because it's a big deal, and they want the ratings. And you have to be careful with this. But you look back and you say, well, was there a jurisdictional conflict between the agencies? I, is there egos involved here? Very well could be. Um, I don't know, Jim. I'm just very, very saddened by the way this thing was handled from the outset. The great thing about the Bureau is it's always been they come in, they do their job, they never say a word. And it came to the point, and I go back to the Idaho murders. The Bureau was involved in that the whole time, never said a word. And the Idaho State Police and the local police department called the FBI in. And who makes the arrest but the FBI? We never knew it was going to happen until it happened. That's the great thing about the Bureau. They keep their mouth shut, and they put their head to the trail, and they just keep on going. But I'm hoping that the full truth here about this investigation becomes public. What do you think? I'm going to ask you this question. Do you think that the media helped or hurt this investigation?
Um, that's a good question. I mean, they have a right. I'm a. I mentioned Second Amendment supporter before.
First
I
Amendment.
certainly am First Amendment supporter too. Freedom of the press, among other things. But yeah, there has to be responsibility with that, and we can spend several episodes discussing that and some of the blatant disregard that today's media has for the truth. Um, I tell you, I'm a lot more impressed. And we're not we're not investigative journalists, Ray. We're not
Correct.
journalists at all. We've been on a few podcasts with those who I would give that title to. I'd say Brian Nenton, one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you what, and I've been on with Megyn Kelly, and I don't know if she calls herself a journalist or not. And we're not going to get the political side of things with her. I'm strictly talking about this case. I was on like 18 times with her over less than a month. But I think they've uncovered a lot more. Some of those people, at least on some occasions, than, as far as we know, the investigators have. I mean, with some of these podcasters and private and social media type investigators who saw blood on on the walkway, and they were getting pizzas delivered to the house, whatever. I'm just saying how things should not have been handled by the crime scene folks at the time. So did the media? I guess we'll find out in the long run.
I agree with that.
We are not media. However, as podcasters, with the background that we have, we still vent um, we still vent our observations, if that's a proper verb phrase there. But we certainly say what's good, what's bad, and we posit profiles, behavioral analyses, and we'll see in the long run, how off we are, how on we were. Both of our track records are pretty good in that regard. No profile is ever 100% accurate, but if you get about 90%, that helps the investigators narrow down that suspect pool when the time comes, or the public narrow down that suspect pool. That that could be valuable in that regard, and that's what we try to do here on Cold Red, because that's what we did together, Ray, in the FBI. I mean, you were in Philly, I was in Quantico, but we worked together a lot on cases.
Mhm.
We've talked about a bunch of them here. We've written books about them. The 30-year bank robber with you, and a bunch of my books, and the journey to the center of the mind, different cases we worked. So, and it's tough to give that up. I wouldn't want to be carrying a badge and a gun right now. Um, whether I do or not is one or the other is for me and no one else to know. But no, I mean, the law enforcement is a tough job today, and the last thing I want to do, Ray, and we discussed this on the air and off the air, we don't want to make it tougher for them. And even we put out a profile of who we thought was the Brown shooter. That was back in December, and I had a problem with some of those officials in some of what they were saying. But I kept saying the rank and file are going to solve this. And within 5 days, they identified this wacky Portuguese national, and of course he was already dead. Yeah, the true cowards kill themselves,
Right.
as we know in these types of cases. Uh, so so yeah, we do our best to talk to our audience, our fans, and we know we have a lot of law enforcement that listen to us, and we say, hey, based on our experience, here's maybe something you didn't quite think of in this case, and hopefully maybe you will. So um, I'll give the media, uh, a B plus, A minus for now, in terms of at least a lot of the individual media people, maybe independent, as opposed to the legacy who are there for the clicks, whatever. And I'll leave it with this: we're talking about the media. I have nothing against sheriffs in this country. I've known some of them. I've known
Hmm.
people that work with them. But sheriffs, unlike police commissioners or chiefs of police, sheriffs get elected. So I'm not sure if the Pima County sheriff is looking at an election coming up when some decisions are made. I certainly hope not. Whether he's not a kid, he may even be older than us, right? That would be hard to believe. But I'm not sure if he plans on running again. But he's one of these guys, I think, with like 50 years in law enforcement at two different agencies. Maybe it's time to hang up the gloves, as they say. But that'll be, of course, his decision, and those who would vote for him or not vote for him in that regard. So yeah, so let's just hope. I'm not giving up hope on this case.
Not
In the Lindbergh kidnapping in the early 1930s, the deceased body of the baby hadn't even been found yet at the 3.5 month point. That
right.
was almost a year afterwards, and they were still negotiating Mr. Charles Lindbergh with the kidnapper to get the safe return of the baby back. Then they found the body, and it was still a year or so after that when an arrest was finally made. So, but that was 1932. That was
Yeah.
almost 100 years ago, and technology is a lot different today in many ways, and it's frustrating with all the tag readers and the cell tower recognition and facial recognition that somehow, somewhere, a lead hasn't developed. And I just hope it's not too late and no damage was done at the very top of these investigative agencies that will cause this from someday being resolved.
Here's one question that came from our audience uh, about Nancy Guthrie. They wanted to know, what lessons should law enforcement agencies take from this case? And I'm going to tell them the one thing that I think is most important is check your ego at the door. and extend your hand and say, I don't have all the best things in my toolkit. You have tools that I don't have. Can you come in and share your tools with me? That's how you solve cases. I've always said that we are better together than by ourselves. And if law enforcement agencies would learn to walk it, and Jim, many moons ago when we came on this job, a lot of the police departments that I walk into a police department, they say who I am with the FBI, and I get the cold shoulder. They didn't like the FBI, and you know that. And you have to win them over. But when push came to shove, and when the rubber hit the road, then we were going to be better together than we were individually. And that's what's important. The resources that the Bureau brings to the table is unbelievable. You know what? All the police departments I know have budgets. The Bureau has a budget too, but I've seen them go above and beyond that budget when needed to, and to get appropriation for more money when they need it. The Bureau is an unbelievable asset to anybody that if you're willing to ask for help, I've never heard them say no, ever, in all my years. And I know you haven't either. So I hope that that's the one lesson that I hope that law enforcement agencies take is, hey, extend your hand, ask for help. I've never heard a cop not. Why would a cop refuse to help another cop, but they don't refuse to help someone in trouble? If I'm asking you for help, that means I need help.
Well, we mentioned the word earlier, ego,
Mhm.
and you know, terms such as that hubris in some cases, especially with bosses. I remember I wrote this in my second book, which is all about my 11 years as a police officer. Um, Ever since almost I was a rookie, oh, the FBI comes in and steals your cases. Yeah, yeah. And I'm 23 years old. Oh, yeah. Watch the FBI. Yeah, they come in, they steal your case. Okay. I got a little bit older, got in the detective division. What cases were stolen? Well, I can't name it. Was there ever a case the FBI? No. And by the time I'm applying to the bureau, I actually met some agents. I made a big bank robbery arrest in the late 80s, which didn't hurt me getting hired by the FBI. My application was already in. It's all in my second book. but um, but we made the arrest, but of course it's bank robbery. It's a federal crime. We turned it over to them, but they sent nice letters to me and to our agency, and they were very magnanimous. And any news articles they put out, again, this is well before the internet, so that's something. And I always made sure when I was dealing with smaller agencies that one of the first things I would say is, just so you guys know, unless there's some federal nexus that develops in this crime, you're putting the handcuffs on them, not me or them, whatever, however many people are being arrested. We're just here to help. And if we'll stay in the background, you do your thing, and we'll gladly support that there. So, and there are some, like the DC sniper is a classic case. And I was at Quantico at the time, the FBI Academy profiling unit. Um, as big as that case was, with international headlines every day of the week, and certainly after each of the 10 shootings, um, um, it was not an FBI case. It was Montgomery County, Maryland, Chief Moose, who was running
Yeah.
that case, and we basically had to answer to him. I was pretty well known as a profiler and a forensic, at least the early days of my forensic linguistic studies. Chief, show us the tarot card. Show us the tarot card. We had to beg for almost a week to get a copy of the tarot card. We didn't even want the original. And that, again, that's all in uh, my fourth book. But it was a very frustrating on that part. And eventually we did put things together, and we could. Then he started turning over letters right away that were being left at the crime scene. So, but you do get hubris, you do get egos involved sometimes, insecurities, and I don't know if any of that's involved in Pima County, Arizona, but I hope not. And I hope and pray, and I'll praise, and I'll give a congratulatory, even metaphorical backslap to the sheriff if in fact an arrest is made and they were onto something all along. But I'm not, unfortunately, not holding my breath on that. at
I sure
100
hope so, Jim. I hope you're right on
110
that.
days or so, wherever we are in that case. So, yeah, folks, we don't have a whole lot to offer here because we're not hearing anything out of them, which maybe is a good thing, Ray. But
I agree.
I certainly hope there are leads and all these too many leads that they were complaining about early on. I'm getting emails from people, and they're all over the place, and I am passing them on to the task force as best as I can. I tell the people, you turn it over first. But there are
Mhm.
some very interesting things, including some local journalists, and of course, our president was involved in this. Like, we can go down the line, and the kind of person who was at the door. They look at the gloves and a ring that was underneath, what that means, who wore those rings. So the amateurs are out there all over the place. You and I are not amateurs, and we do our best to vet this information. If it looks like it makes one or two notches above the make sense line, if you will, we'll do our best to encourage them to forward it to the authorities. So let's hope something comes out of this, and let's hope. I still say to the abductor, if you're out there, until you let people know why you did this, you're just probably a pervert who likes sex with old women. And there's a name for that. You can look it up. And Ray, your plea was turn yourself in because you're going to wake up every day not knowing if the
That's
cops are
right.
going to throw a flashbang through your window and come in with guns drawn. And then you have to decide what the two kids did yesterday morning, whether you shoot it out with the cops or put a bullet through your own head. But if nothing else, turn yourself in. If nothing else besides that, send an anonymous letter, protect yourself on it, and just say the reason why you did this. And I think without enough to even be caught, and at least give yourself some legacy here, and not just some very likely sex pervert who likes old women.
I agree, Jim. Good way to end
Right?
it.
I'm going to take it out. Yeah, on that not so pleasant note, folks. Thanks again for this just me and Ray episode of Cold Red. Please check us out on our media sites and blog sites, coldredpodcast.com. Like, subscribe. Of course, we're on YouTube. You can actually see us on YouTube, and that's a real bonus, right, Ray?
Yeah, I'm
Right.
sure it
Just
is.
say yes, Ray. Thanks again to our producers, Matt Robinson, Matt McLaughlin, our music coordinator, Rick Schilling, and everyone. Thanks again for listening to this episode of